Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. And today folks, while we are still focusing on the month's goal for simple and single mechanic ideas, we're finally making a game that I've been putting off for way too long. So before we jump into this thing, remember that if you enjoy the video to leave a like, also remember to subscribe if you're new, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. Okay, so I have been wanting to recreate the good old card game War in video game form for a while now. Like, it's been planned for at least 2 years, and without getting into any political nonsense, things kept happening in the world where it just didn't feel appropriate to, release a fun dev video on a game called War. But at this point, it seems a little foolish to wait for a moment that in reality, sadly, may never be appropriate. So all I can say is I hope that by the time this video is released, it's not during World War III. So anyway, this is my take on the War card game, which uses rules provided by Bicycle's official website. A link to said rules can be found in the description, but don't worry if you're unfamiliar with how War is played, we'll cover it as we go. So the entire game is run based on states and timers, similar to a turn-based RPG combat system. To start, our deck is generated with the typical 52 card setup. It is then randomly split into 2 decks for both player and CPU. Next, we wait for the player to initiate a battle with spacebar. Once initiated, both decks draw a card using our draw card function. And this is our first deviation from the usual mechanics, as it was simply easier to code this way. Basically, each time a card is drawn, both player and CPU's decks are first shuffled, and then a random card is chosen, which is different from the usual exhaust hand first method. Anyway, when a card is drawn, we literally generate a card in the form of a struct. Data included are for suit, number, and owner, and other variables needed to treat this as a physical object in our game world. That card is then added to a play pool list for future reference. So with cards drawn, we then check the results. If one card's value is greater than the other, the owner of the higher card wins and we are sent to the award state. However, if both cards match, it's wartime. This initiates a different state that has each player draw 3 more cards from their deck. Then we await the player to make a choice on which card to play from those 3 with a left click. When chosen, this triggers the CPU to randomly choose one of their cards, and another win check is made. And this is where our second mechanical deviation comes in. If both chosen cards are somehow of the same value, normally war would continue until a winner is decided. However, our version simply returns all played cards back to their owners and we continue the game. Else a winner is decided and we return back to the award state. Now in the award state, all 1 cards are moved to the winning side and an award function is triggered. This simply takes all the cards in the pool and adds their data to the winner's deck, then deletes them from the game completely. We are then returned to the starting state to await the player's input to repeat the process over again. And of course, the first one to have absolutely 0 cards left in their deck at any point loses. And that was it. That was the attempt to turn War the card game into War the video game based on the card game. And because this entire thing was based on timers, it was also really easy to make the gameplay itself to completion. So if set to automatic, both sides will continually draw cards and choose cards at random during wartime. Finally, the thing I enjoyed most about putting this project together was figuring out the movement of the cards. While the original project way back in the day was meant to include flipping and fancier animations, I was able to handle majority of movement through 2 variables and some math. By having destination coordinates and a list of landing points for things like each player's deck, all we needed was a simple function that would update each card's destination to move to a targeted landing point. Then a simple positional math equation plus a timer does the rest. Now it would have been nice to animate everything, but that would have taken so much extra time, which was sadly not on our side this session because this project was kind of a last-minute decision. Future Keaton here, editing this in last minute to say that this is where I originally had a cheesy segue into a Patreon promo, but instead I have the absolute honor of announcing our very first legacy patron, Zoom1987. So shoutouts to Zoom1987 for their generosity, which definitely deserves to be immortalized. Now if you enjoy the content and would like to help me keep making it, consider supporting me on Patreon. Doing so can get you access to exclusive content and downloads, and even early access to these Dev Diary videos before they're released on YouTube. And maybe even become a legacy member and get yourself immortalized like Zoom1987. Alright, thank you for your time and back to the video. Now again, I realized that some changes were made to the functionality of the game, but most were due to time constraints. Otherwise, we'd need like an entirely independent hand system to go along with the deck system and the play system, and it just would have been way more complicated. Also, I had no idea that players were allowed to choose their card during wartime. I only found out that was a thing when looking up the quote-unquote official rules for the game. I mean, was it just me that was taught that like the last card drawn was your decided card? I don't know. Anyway, with that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.